Now, the streets of Paris look like a war zone earlier this week, with protests that turned into wild riots. These scenes followed a mass shooting by a man allegedly targeting the Kurdish community. Joining me now is best-selling author of The War on the West, Douglas Murray. Douglas, these scenes reminded me of another best-selling book of yours, The Strange Death of Europe. Incredible stuff to see in Paris yet again.
That's right, Rita. I'm sort of sad and glad that you make that link, because that's exactly what came to my mind with this. I've covered what's been going on the continent for a very long time now, as have you, and much of this is both simultaneously incredibly sad and horribly predictable. You know, France has had a very uncontrolled form of immigration, mass immigration, for many decades now. Some of those people are legal immigrants, millions are legal immigrants, and at least hundreds of thousands are illegal immigrants. And feeling in the country among a lot of those communities runs very high. We saw it recently just with, you know, soccer teams in the World Cup. There was rioting on the streets when Morocco was doing well or badly, on the streets of France. And now we see this horrific attack on the Kurdish community and Kurdish violence as a result. As I say in The Strange Death of Europe, you know, there are lots of advantages to immigration, and countries like Australia have seen some of those advantages. But the problem with immigration is if you import the world's people, you also import the world's problems. You import ethnic strife that you didn't have before, religious strife you didn't have before, and you've got to relitigate whole areas of your culture and sometimes change them. So, you know, it's just awful scenes, but scenes we've seen before in France, and I very much fear we're going to see again, and not just in France.
And Douglas, grim times in the UK as well. You wrote a fantastic piece in The Telegraph where you say there's little reason for optimism in a broken Britain, with a weak government, emboldened unions. Just how bad is the situation over there?
Well, you know, it's really interesting, Rita. I mean, it's horribly. I only just made it into the 1970s. I was born in '79, but I certainly heard about the 1970s. And everything that's going on at the moment is horribly reminiscent of that dire decade in Britain. That was a decade, you know, some people will remember, where the unions had the government in their grip. The dead even lay unburied in the UK over strikes that were going on. And at the moment, I've just got back from Britain, there have been rail strikes that have ground the country to a halt repeatedly. There have been mail strikes at the time of year when people actually use the mail. There have been nurses' strikes. We're always told the saintly nurses. Well, in order to get an almost 20% pay rise, nurses also went on strike recently and are going to keep doing so. And the advice, by the way, from the NHS is don't do anything dangerous if you can help it during this period. So if you were going to encourage your nanny to go bungee jumping, tell her not to at the moment, because the NHS is striking. I'm afraid this is just horribly reminiscent of this period that went on before Margaret Thatcher came to power, when she, of course, got the unions under her control rather than the government being under theirs. But yes, it is a sign of terrible weakness in a society when a society can be effectively ground to a halt by unions demanding above inflation pay raises, not below, above inflation pay raises in many cases, in fact, in almost all cases, with jobs that are above the average salary. You know, people who work in the private sector don't get pay rises just because inflation's going on. It's only the public sector workers that get to strike and draw the country to a halt over these things, and the people who've got people like the unions representing them. It's a terrible state of affairs, and if only there was a Thatcher to come along and save Britain again.
There are no signs of Thatchers in the current Tories, though, isn't there? There's pretty grim and pretty shallow talent pool there. And incredible to see in the UK, 5 million people sitting at home on welfare out of work benefits.
That's right.
When there's more than 1 million job vacancies going begging. I mean, that almost sounds more like a cultural problem than an economic one.
Yeah. You're absolutely right, Rita. You've just put your finger on the most shocking statistic. You know, there is a labour shortage in the UK, and yet more than 5 million people are sitting on out-of-work benefits. You know, what's wrong with the system? You know, this isn't a culture war issue. This is a culture issue. Why have we got these people in this situation? If they're not able to work, why aren't they able to work? Why aren't they prepared for the 21st century? Why aren't they capable of doing the jobs that are needed of them? Personally, I believe that millions of those people are perfectly able to work. Many of them will want to work, but they need to effectively be pushed into it. Britain does not need to have this situation, and I wish we could get out of it.